Hello and welcome to the Saturday Morning Spread with your host, Mark Henry Jr. You can give me a follow at Mark Henry Jr. NFL over on Twitter and check out the Eagles Pinpool YouTube and go subscribe over on the Eagles Pinpool YouTube channel where this is being streamed. It's being streamed live on my Twitter, being streamed live on the Eagles Pinpool YouTube for you to catch later, and it'll also be uploaded on the Eagles Pinpool podcast feed. But, folks, we got a big show ahead. This is, I feel like a lot of times I come on here and I go over the top. I say, oh, this is the best blank, or this is the best weekend, or this is the best month of the year. We are entering the greatest portion of the sports calendar going into October. We have 2 days left of the MLB regular season. That's hitting the MLB playoffs. We'll have Red October, a lot of coverage of that right here on this show. By the way, next week, Jack Fritz from WIP will be on this show on October 4th, on the first day of the NLDS, to talk all things Phillies and the MLB playoffs. So we are really, really excited to have Jack on for the first time next week. And then, of course, we've got the NFL. That's rolling. That's going to be rolling through February. But the reason this is a special show, the reason this is a big show, is because this is one of the best college football slates I have ever seen. We have two really good ones coming again this year. I think it's October 18th and November 1st. We have a couple more really, really good slates, but this could be better than both of them. This is a really, really special slate, and I could talk about it. I could do a bit more of an intro. Let's get into it. Let's break down these games. I think we might get you guys out of here in about an hour instead of a 2-hour show today. I don't have a ton of gambling plays on the card. I think I have 8 college football plays, and I think I have a similar number in the NFL. Only one play on the NFL 1 o'clock slate, which we'll get to when we move over to the NFL. But it's just me today. No guest, 8 a.m. I wanted to get up, and this is going to be what Saturday Morning Spread is a lot of the time, just taking you through the spreads, taking you through my picks, the same way I used to do over at the Tough Cover. But let's start it off. College football week 5 at noon. I'm going to start with UCF. I got it early at +7. I think that number is now at 6, 5.5, 6.5, whatever you can get it at. I'm fine with whatever number because I think they're going to win the game outright. K-State is 117th in yards per game, 91st in scoring, 110th in rushing yards allowed, 86th in points allowed. This was the team I predicted to make the college football playoff and to win the Big 12. They're one of the worst teams in the Big 12, bar none. 2025 Kansas State, in my opinion, is 2024 Florida State. And we saw Vegas give that team way too much credit for way too long throughout that entire season. I think we're seeing the same thing here with K-State being a 7-point favorite against a Power 4 team. This is, to me, just a fade of a bad team. But having said all that, as my friend Rico Bosco says, some things are bigger than sports. UCF's offensive line coach passed away this week. I think UCF goes out and plays for their coach. From all accounts, the team loved him. Everybody who's been around him at different stops loved him. He was a great guy. And I think college football has this way of the feel-good story of the day coming through, I feel like. And I think I can already see the college game day piece today about that coach. And I could see another one next week if they win today, and that being kind of the feel-good story of the day. But on top of that, I like it for football reasons. I had my eyes on this before that happened this week. And maybe the players will be, grief-stricken, and it's a horrible thing to have happen to a really young coach with a young family. But I do think UCF is a better team than K-State right now, because I think K-State might be the worst team in the Big 12 with the way that they're playing. I'm done kind of thinking about what they were coming into the year. Clearly Chris Kleiman has not gotten this team ready to go. And we can point fingers and say whatever we can figure out whatever the reason is for that, but I don't think that he fixed it. So I am extremely skeptical that K State should be favored by a touchdown here. Another game at 12 o'clock. I like the over at 60.5 in USC, Illinois. Since 2021, when Lincoln Riley took over at USC, they are the best team in the country at hitting the over, 38-18. USC's offense is third in the FBS in yards per game, fifth in scoring, and they're going up against an Illinois defense that just gave up 65 to Indiana. Before last game, Illinois had scored 52, 45, and 38 points, so they can put points on the board as well. Jaden Mayava has been unbelievable, and I don't know if enough people are talking about it. And I think if USC cements themselves as a competitor in the Big Ten or to make the playoff, whatever you want to say, I do think people will have to start taking him seriously as a, if not a full on Heisman contender, someone who could earn an invite to New York. This is a really interesting game to me. Illinois obviously got blown out by Indiana 65-10 last week, but they had taken care of some teams before that, Tulane and Duke. I think Illinois is better than we saw last week, but I do think it was a joke that they were ever ranked in the top 10. So I this is an interesting spread. I obviously have the over at 61.5. USC is a 6.5 point favorite. I feel like the first couple weeks of the year, USC wasn't getting a ton of credit from Vegas, and Vegas maybe wasn't taking them super seriously. So this to me feels like Vegas taking them seriously. Uh, but let me get the tweet out for the people to come over and watch the show here. Give me 10 seconds here. Bad radio. I apologize. And we're back. Let's talk about the 3:30 slate. Let's talk about the afternoon slate. 3:30. My favorite play of the 3:30 slate. I like Texas A&M -6 against Auburn. This game is a 2-unit play. By the way, UCF 3-unit play over in USC Illinois only a 1-unit play. Texas A&M is a 2-unit play here. A&M had a whole week off to not get complacent after a huge Notre Dame win, and here they are preparing for another big game at home this time against Auburn. The Aggies hope this is the year they finally get over the hump and reach the first SEC title game after they've only won more than 9 games just one time since joining the SEC. That came in their first year in the league in 2012 when they went 11-2 behind Johnny Manziel's Heisman winning season. Well, 2020 they probably would have. Kellen Mond had them as the number 5 team in the country when the season closed, so they probably would have won 10 plus games that year. Obviously, shortened season though. To do that and to follow through and to get back to where they want to go and where they've never been in the SEC, I, and I believe they can and will, they have to win games like this against Auburn and take care of business. You have tougher games down the pike if you're Texas A&M. You have a trip to LSU. You have a trip to Missouri. You have a trip to Texas. Those are 3 tougher games than this one, and you need to at least win one of those 3 games. And I think they take care of business here as well. So give me Texas A&M -6. A&M just has every piece I could possibly want in a playoff team to buy in on. The big non-conference road win, great head coach who will improve the defense as the year goes along, stud quarterback, stud running back, stud wide receivers. Jackson Arnold was sacked 10 times last week, and Auburn is the second worst team in the country in sacks allowed. I think Texas A&M's defense starts to get going here today. The glare here is crazy. I apologize. It is so bright in my my slider door over there, but we're gonna keep working through it. For the audio listeners, I apologize for an unnecessary piece of information. Another 3:30 game, and this is a money in the dumpster. There's always money in the banana stand. If you watch Arrested Development, there's always money at the bottom of the dumpster. Sometimes you just gotta strap on some a hazmat suit and go searching for it. And I'm here to do that for you. And the money that's in the bottom of this ugly, ugly dumpster, Northwestern -6 against UCLA. This is a 1 unit play. This is just the second time in the last 37 Big Ten games that Northwestern is favored. And it's the first time since 2020 that Northwestern has been this big of a favorite in a conference game. This is just a full on fade of UCLA, who absolutely sucks. And I think that's what the Vegas line is telling you there. Northwestern did not get completely embarrassed by Oregon, and they also totally didn't embarrass themselves either against Tulane. The offense did not play well, but the defense hung pretty tough against Tulane. UCLA is 113th in yards, 132nd in scoring, while also being outside of the top 120 in both of those stats on defense. Tried to make a quick light adjustment there. We will figure this out for next week. But let's get to the big dogs. Let's you know what? Let's skip the two big dogs at 7:45. I have one more big game. Give me or not, maybe not as big of a game. Give me South Carolina -5.5 against Kentucky. There's I understand why we're kind of quitting on South Carolina and why we're throwing them in the trash and why we're kind of all done with South Carolina at this point. But it's Kentucky. This is not a tough matchup. I think we're getting a discount here of the 5.5 point spread. I think there's a good chance in a couple weeks this would be far more. And I think we might even be overreacting bigly, as a certain someone would say, to South Carolina's last two games here. In the Vanderbilt game, they lost 31-7. Ugly, ugly, ugly performance. But something that nobody's talking about is that game was tied 7-7 when Lenora Sellers was playing. It was a 7-7 game, and then it was a 24-0 run that Vanderbilt went on once South Carolina had a terrible backup quarterback in the game. So that's where I'm at with it a little bit. And then you also look at South Carolina, Missouri. I feel like the narrative is that Missouri took care of business and blew out South Carolina there. South Carolina was winning in the fourth quarter. They were winning at halftime. They were winning after the first quarter. They were winning in the fourth quarter. South Carolina was winning for most of this game against Missouri, who I think we're going to get to the top 25 in a minute. I think Missouri's very good. So I'm not, and I think Vanderbilt's pretty darn good as well. So I'm not willing to totally say that South Carolina is going to win like 5 games this year. I think they're still probably going to win 7-ish games and be competitive and beat up on teams like Kentucky. So give me South Carolina -5.5 in that one. In the big dogs at 7:30, 3 unit play. Give me Georgia -2.5. This is just the against Alabama, obviously on ABC. This is just the fourth time since Georgia's 33-game home winning streak that the Bulldogs are a single-digit favorite, and the first time that they were favored by less than a touchdown. In the 3 previous instances, Georgia was a single-digit favorite in their home winning streak. The Bulldogs won each game by at least 14 points and allowed a total of 36 points in the 3 games. Also, I just want to ask a question to the group. Did everybody watch Florida State lose? That was a better endorsement last night against Virginia than anything I can say about betting Georgia. So I think Georgia hasn't gotten, I mean, putting that aside, I think Georgia hasn't gotten nearly enough credit for going into Knoxville, beating a good Tennessee team and putting up 44 on the road, winning a nail biter. Gunner threw for 304 yards, scored 3 touchdowns. Longtime top prospect junior wide receiver Zachariah Branch answered the call against Tennessee by leading the Bulldogs with 5 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to force overtime at the end of the game. I think there are 4 teams who can win the national title: Georgia is one of those teams. Alabama is absolutely not. It's that simple to me. Alabama has a pass rush win rate that ranks 126th in the country, and they have been one of the worst in the nation in the red zone on defense. I think this Georgia offense is better than people are giving them credit for after that performance against Tennessee. I was incredibly impressed by that. And for a motivation factor, Kirby's going to have these dogs barking. He is 1-6 against Bama. He just lost to Kalen DeBoer. I guarantee he doesn't want to start 0-2 against Kalen DeBoer against this brand new Alabama coach. So I think Kirby shows up and puts it on Alabama a little bit here. And my hot take and my biggest prediction of the night for the two big games is that Georgia and Oregon win them, and they're not particularly close. We have two huge games tonight, two of the biggest games. I don't ever remember two games being on at the same time that are as good as or as big as these two games. But give me the Oregon Ducks plus 3.5 at Penn State for my best bet of the weekend. Not just college football, but NFL as well. This is my favorite bet of the weekend. I had two of my favorite bets of the last two nights. Cashed the Seahawks on Thursday, cashed TCU last night. We're on a bit of a hot streak. We are plus 27.5 units in the NFL, plus 4 units in college football. So we're feeling pretty good riding into our best bet of the weekend. And I've been building to this one for months, if not weeks, with the Oregon Ducks. I've been begging the odds makers to give me a plus sign here. I understand it's in Happy Valley, and they did just that. And I'll get to all the reasons that I'm fading Penn State. I've talked about it all off season. You've probably heard it. But let's talk about Oregon a little bit. Led by first-year starting quarterback Dante Moore, the Ducks are 7th in scoring offense and 12th in total offense. They're averaging 269 yards through the air per game. Dante Moore already has 11 touchdown passes. A win and a big offensive showing from Dante Moore here, and he is probably the prohibitive favorite to win the Heisman and be the first quarterback drafted. So far, Oregon has scored touchdowns on all but one opening possession. They've scored 8 first quarter touchdowns in total. They've gotten started fast and they've kept their foot on the gas. They've allowed just 1 sack in 4 games. Oregon's secondary, they've been amazing. They have not allowed a passing touchdown and have only given up 120 passing yards per game. I love Oregon, and I really think you look around at the big dogs this year, and the big dogs maybe their bark isn't quite as loud as it has been in maybe the pre-NIL, pre-transfer portal era where they were 4 or 5 deep at every position with 5 stars. Those guys transfer elsewhere so they can play now. It's a different world that we live in, and you look around, and I think this is the year of the duck. I've been saying this since the off season, but Dan Lanning, Dante Moore, speed all over the field, a nasty defense. They only have one scary marquee Big Ten test here. I think Oregon is going to win the title, and I think they're going to win this game. And I think they're going to run the table up to the Big Ten championship. Maybe they lose in the Big Ten title game, but I think Oregon's the best team in the country. I know that they haven't played a ton of great talent, but they've taken care of business to any degree that you could possibly want a team to against not great talent. So moving on from Oregon, the thing I can't get past is how much people love this Penn State team and have since June. They returned a ton of talent from last year. Sure. They also lost Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren. Besides Saquon Barkley and Micah Parsons, those are the best players James Franklin's ever coached, and he has to deal with losing both of them, one on each side of the ball, at the same time in the same year. And then he has to go figure out how to win the big games that he couldn't win with them. And a big reason he couldn't win those big games with them, people don't want to talk about it, but it's Drew Aller. In 9 games against ranked teams in the last 2 years, Drew Aller has thrown for 166 yards per game with 10 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and a 54% completion percentage. He's only thrown for more than 200 yards twice in those games. Penn State is 3-6 in those games where Drew Aller has played against a ranked opponent. Of the 135 qualified quarterbacks this year in QBR, Drew Aller entered the week 106th at 38.8. I'm not going to tell you that that's perfect, but that's right behind South Alabama's Bishop Davenport and West Virginia's Nico Marshall, who frequently gets benched for other quarterbacks on the roster. And then you turn the page to big game James. James Franklin has failed to cover his last 5 games against top 5 opponents. Now, Oregon's number 6 in the AP, number 5 in the coaches, so it doesn't technically match that. So let's dial it back to top 10. Penn State is 4-20, blazing, bro. Woo! Versus top 10 opponents under James Franklin. One of the wins came against G5 Boise State last year in the college football playoff. So, and by the way, another one of those wins, SMU in the college football playoff last year. So if you limit it to Big Ten top 10 opponents, Penn State is 2-18 in those games, 3-11 when they are also ranked in the top 10, 1-9 in that situation against the Big Ten. So I don't know how many stats people need. I don't know how many times people need to see it. I swear, when Penn State lost to Notre Dame, and this is not just biased Notre Dame fan. If anything, I would want to try to say it's a good loss and they shouldn't be down about losing to Notre Dame. But when Penn State lost to Notre Dame and blew the easiest path they will ever have to competing for a national championship, they have Boise State and SMU to get to the Final Four. Then you get Notre Dame, who couldn't really complete a forward pass most of the time. Penn State's never getting that easy of a path again. And I really thought, based on the reaction when they lost to Notre Dame, that as a college football society, we all decided, like, you know what? It's never going to happen. They're never going to win that big game. They're never going to get over the hump. And then this offseason rolled around, and the hype was louder than ever without Abdul Carter, without Tyler Warren, who, by the way, both doing pretty well on Sundays. I just... Nothing is done. Maybe I'll be wrong. There were 2 big takes in terms of teams I was fading coming into the year in the college football season. 2 teams that were being elevated as national title contenders that I did not understand. One of those was Clemson. I'd like to think I was pretty correct there. The other one is Penn State. I understand Penn State a little bit more because Penn State's a lock to be in the playoff. James Franklin, all those stuff I could say, he wins the games he's supposed to. He's going to go win 9 or 10 games. He's going to get to the playoffs. So the Clemson one was crazier to me. But the 2 teams I did not understand why they were being elevated as national title contenders were Clemson and Penn State. And I'm excited for Penn State to prove me right tonight. Now, let's get to the big games that I don't have a bet on. At 12 o'clock, my beloved Notre Dame Fighting Irish traveling to Fayetteville, Arkansas to play the Arkansas Razorbacks. I don't have a play on this one. I would lean over 63.5 because, as Rico Bosco would say, ND stands for no defense right now. Arkansas's defense, not much better, but this is a high number. This number's all the way up there at 63.5. I'm going to pull the lines up, the updated lines, so I'm not giving you guys old fake lines here, but it'll be interesting to see Notre Dame, if the defense stands up a little bit here. I would guess no. 63.5 on the total, and I would lean towards the over. Another total that I would lean towards the over of is Louisville Pitt at 12 o'clock. That total is sitting around 55.5. Both of these teams can score, can put points up on the board. No matter what, this is kind of an agenda win game for me. If Pitt wins, they get to be that sneaky team that I kind of was saying was going to be sneaky this year. If Louisville wins, I've got a future on Louisville to win the ACC. No matter what, I'm coming out ahead, as Mac from Always Sunny would say. Cincinnati at Kansas, a Big 12 matchup at noon. I lean Kansas here. I might live bet this if Kansas goes down. I don't believe in Cincinnati. Don't believe in Satterfield. So if I were to play on that one, I would go with Kansas. Duke Syracuse. This is a game I guarantee if Steve Angeli was out there, the line would probably be a little shorter. Duke would probably be like a 1 or 2 point favorite instead of a 4.5 point favorite. Maybe it's a pick 'em. I would have loved Syracuse in this spot in the Carrier Dome, but I can't touch it. I can't touch this on either side. I would lean still with Syracuse plus 4.5. I'm a Fran Brown believer. I think someone at a national school really needs to give Fran Brown a chance. Maybe that's Clemson once Dabo's gone. I think Fran Brown's a really, really special coach. So he's the type of guy I would look at there. But 12 o'clock, Rutgers, Minnesota. I like Rutgers here. I think Minnesota has been overrated by Vegas pretty much every game. It's felt like on the spread, especially against Cal and Buffalo. But I lean Rutgers here. I bet Rutgers last week was not a fun ride. I'm stepping off the Rutgers roller coaster. I can't bet this one, but I do think if I was going to bet on that side, it would be Rutgers, not Minnesota. At 3:30, one of the best games of the day, and I think not. This is not tuning my own horn. I think something that's different about me and my gambling show than most college football gambling shows or gamblers is that I'm not going to tell you when I have a pick on a game, or I'm not going to tell you I have a pick on a game when I don't. I think this game's a 50-50 toss up. I would not bet this game with your money, let alone my money. And I think that's valuable. I'm telling you the games that you should be betting on and not just every big game. Here's the bet to find on it. I think it's important to preach caution within yourself and not just fall for it and bet every big game. Anyway, I'll step off my soapbox. I think Trinidad Chambliss might be special. He's rushed for 300 or he threw for 300 and rushed for 100 each of the last 2 weeks. I think they got lucky with Austin Simmons getting hurt. It's unfortunate to say about Austin Simmons. I'm sure he's going to turn it around, and I know he's a big NFL prospect, a young kid. He's going to get a chance somewhere else. But I think Trinidad Chambliss, while he pipped him, I think he took his job, and I could see the story coming out of today being that Trinidad Chambliss is the story of the day and maybe even a Heisman contender, even though he didn't play the first couple weeks of the season. What Ole Miss did to Tulane last week was eye-opening. I don't think Tulane's a bad team whatsoever. That was an impressive win. So I've got my future on LSU to win the title, LSU to make the playoff, yada, yada, yada. I came into the year thinking maybe a down year for Ole Miss, an up year for LSU. Here we are, and the game's in Ole Miss, and I couldn't touch it. I'm not touching this one. I'm not going to throw away my preseason LSU convictions, but I'm also not going to bet just based on the last 2 weeks and how impressive Chambliss has been. Now, I might go all in on Trinidad Chambliss once this game's over and bet on them going forward in a ton of games. But this one, sit back and watch and learn about what these two teams and schools are this year. Another great game that's not really getting any attention because of how incredible this whole slate is, but Ohio State, Washington. Ohio State, 8.5 point favorite. I would lean with Ohio State. I know it's across the country. There's sailgating going on at Washington. But I think Ohio State's just, I talked about how Oregon's going to win the title. Ohio State's probably the most likely team to win the title. I think it's going to be Ohio State or Oregon. Probably whoever wins that Big 12 champion or Big 10 championship if they both end up getting there. But give me Ohio State in that one. Indiana at Iowa. I'm not going to bet Indiana in this game because it feels like such a sucker bet. But how could you bet Iowa coming off of what we saw from Indiana last week? What an incredibly impressive performance. At 3:30, we've got Utah, West Virginia. Utah, 12.5 point favorite on the road in West Virginia. West Virginia's win against Pitt was a total fluke, in my opinion, and Utah was not nearly as bad as they showed against Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech's a really good team. So I would expect a Kyle Whittingham classic bounce back here for the Utes. So give me Utah laying the number. I would, again, these are not my bets. These are my leans. If you made me make a play on every big game, this is where I would go. But these are not on my official card. At 3:30, Cal at Boston College. Luckily, I hopped off the Cal train last week when they were a big favorite because people didn't remember that Justin Wilcox stinks as a big favorite. But I would maybe hop back on him here. 6.5 point dog at Boston College. Only problem is it's all the way across the country after all the air taken out of the Cal balloon last week. I'm not going to bet this one. I have my eyes on it though because Cal might make the card next week. At 4:15, a big matchup for my guy Brandon Walker's Mississippi State Bulldogs, who should be ranked in the top 25, in my opinion. Now, especially with a win over Arizona State, who we saw get another impressive win last night. And I still think Arizona State's going to compete in the Big 12, and Mississippi State went in there and took care of business against them and won a fantastic game. I don't think anybody would have expected before the year Mississippi State to be the undefeated team in this matchup and Mississippi State to only be a 7-point underdog. They haven't won an SEC game since 2023. But I'll tell you what, I would lean Mississippi State. I would lean with the Bulldogs getting the points and keeping it close with the Tennessee Volunteers. At 7 o'clock, Virginia Tech at NC State. I lean NC State there, minus 9.5. Big meltdown last week, but I still do believe in CJ Bailey. So I would lean NC State there. And by the way, another one, Baylor. I had Baylor minus 20.5 on the card against Oklahoma State. They fired Gundy. Maybe it might be a dead coach bounce game where they show up for the interim. So I decided to take it off my card. Similar situation with Virginia Tech firing Brent Pry. They've got an interim in there now. So I'm not gonna fade Virginia Tech with an interim in there anymore. Arizona at Iowa State. Arizona's a 6.5-point dog. I would lean Arizona there. Feels like a letdown spot a little bit for Iowa State. BYU Colorado late night action at 10:15. My lean here would be the over. I'm not taking it, but 49.5 would be my lean towards the over. Let's get to the top 25. I'm going to do this every week where I give out my top 25. The only problem is when teams lose on Thursday or Friday, it forces me to adjust. Like I adjusted Florida State and TCU in and out of my rankings, and that's not fair to what the AP did on Monday, but my show's on Saturday, so boo-hoo. Number 1, I'm going with Ohio State, who is number 1 in the AP. Number 2, I'm going with Oregon, who is number 6. Number 3, I am going with Georgia, who is number 5. Number 4, I know they haven't been overly impressive, but I'm giving LSU that number 4 spot. And to me, folks, that wraps up the teams that can win the national title. I think there are 4 teams that can win the national title. Now, there are 3 more teams that I will put in the maybe category, and that is Miami checking in at number 5. They're number 2 in the AP. Number 6, Texas A&M for me, who's number 9 in the AP. And then number 7, Ole Miss, who's number 13 in the AP. Those are the 3 teams because Miami, incredibly easy schedule. They showed up against Notre Dame. I think they're going to be in the playoff. I think they're going to win the ACC. At this point, it's just about how legit are they. I think probably not championship legit. So that's kind of where I shrug my shoulders. Texas A&M is the one that I actually think has the best chance outside that top 4. It's just we've never seen it from A&M. We've never seen it from Elko. They kind of need to prove it before people are going to buy in. And then Ole Miss. This is just a what if Trinidad Chambliss is Cam Newton or someone else, someone truly special who can immediately step in and change the dichotomy of a program. And I think Trinidad Chambliss there's a chance he's that guy. Number 8, I've got Penn State, who's all the way up at number 3 in the poll, which is absurd. Number 9, I've got Indiana. It's all for you. They're number 11 in the AP. I've got them number 9, and you can make a case they should be above some of these teams above them on my list. What they did last week was insane. 65-10 against Illinois. Whatever we want to say about Illinois, Illinois is not a bad football team. I think this is people are not taking Indiana seriously enough even after last week. Number 10, Oklahoma, who I have number 7, or I have number 10. The AP has them number 7. It'll be interesting to see how they fare without John Mateer. They're probably going to go into Red River with a backup quarterback. Number 11, I've got Texas Tech, who after last night's loss from TCU is very clearly to me the Big 12 favorite and probably the Big 12 champion that's going to make the college football playoff. Good for them. They went out and spent that oil money. Number 12, I've got Missouri. They're all the way down at number 20. I think they might be the most underrated team in the country. And you take a look at Missouri's schedule, and you start to wonder what's the upside for this Missouri team, because you just take a look. They have Alabama next week, big one. At Auburn, I think they can handle that. Vanderbilt, Texas A&M at home, Mississippi State at home, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas. No game is easy, but there's no Georgia. There's no Tennessee. There's no there's no LSU. There's no Ole Miss. There's no Texas. Like they're avoiding a lot of the landmines. Even if Missouri just goes 6-2 the rest of the way. Let's say they lose to Alabama and maybe they lose to A&M or Oklahoma. You just have to win, one or two more tough games. And I think we're talking about a playoff team probably with the Missouri Tigers. So Missouri, I have them 12. I think they're going to keep rising. Number 13, I have Texas. The AP has them 10. I'm just, I think it's hard to be too excited about what you've seen from Texas so far. Great defense. The offense has serious problems. Arch, yikes. Number 14, I've got Tennessee. They're number 15 in the AP pool. Number 15, I've got Iowa State. They're number 14 in the AP pool. So I just flipped Tennessee and Iowa State. I'm not going to punish Tennessee too much for losing to a Georgia team who I think is the third best team in the country. Number 16, I have Vanderbilt, who is number 18 in the AP. Who would have thought that Vanderbilt would be a team that I would rank number 16, halfway through or a little less than halfway through this year. Pretty unbelievable stuff. Number 17, I've got Georgia Tech, who is ranked number 16. Number 18, I've got Louisville, who is not ranked in the top 25. Need them to come out today and beat Pitt, and I think they will be next week. Number 19, I actually had Florida State 15 before they lost last night, and I dropped them back to 19. They were 8 coming into the week, which was always, always, always a joke. So I can, I obviously have the benefit of hindsight with a loss last night. I thought 8 was a joke before they lost to Virginia. Number 20, USC, and they could be higher. You could convince me to go higher with USC. They just haven't played anybody yet. Big test today at Illinois. And I know we talked about Illinois with Indiana. They're still a legitimate, competent team. Bielema was a good coach. I think USC takes care of business, and we're talking about maybe a team that's maybe creeping into the top 15. I've got Memphis at number 21. I think they're the G5 prohibitive favorite at this point with USF and Tulane and Boise and some of the slip ups that some of the other guys who we expected to be in that mix have had. UNLV is winning games, but they look horrible. I think Memphis, after a win against a Power Five team in Arkansas, is going to make the college football playoff. Number 22, I've got the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who have lost 2 games by a combined 4 points. It's a depressing start to the season. They got right last week, scoring $1 billion against Purdue, but they got to win out at this point. And today, you got a big test against Arkansas. Is this defense Swiss cheese? And I think we all know that the answer is, yeah, it probably is. But is the offense good enough to carry it? Number 23, Alabama. They are number 17 in the country. I think that's a joke that they've crawled back up to 17 already, especially now looking at Florida State lose last night. Number 24, Michigan, who I have at 19. I was ready to think Michigan shouldn't be ranked with the Oklahoma loss, yada, yada, yada. That win last week was really, really impressive going into Nebraska. Bryce Underwood has looked like a different guy these last 2 weeks. So I'm buying in a little bit more on Michigan than I was in the preseason, or especially I was after that Oklahoma loss. And wrapping up the top 25, number 25, also unranked. The third team I have in my top 25 who is unranked is the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Obviously, a win against Arizona State. I think it's crazy that they're not in this top 25. Now, the 3 teams I didn't rank that were ranked in the top 25, number 23, Illinois. I don't think you can rank a team after losing 65-10. Number 24, TCU. They were ranked in my top 15, actually, until they lost last night. And then BYU. I think it's ridiculous BYU's ranked because they beat Stanford and ECU. Absurd to me. Absolutely absurd. Mississippi State should absolutely be ahead of them. So should other teams. Arizona State now should be ahead of them. I think Utah should be ahead of them. I still think USF should be ahead of them. Obviously, I said Memphis and Louisville. I think you can make a case for UNLV. I think you can make a case for Maryland. I think you can make a case for Washington. I think there's a lot of teams that you can say should be ahead of BYU and Illinois. I thought that was surprising to see them in the AP top 25. But let's move on to the league that pays for play. The National Football League at 9:30 in Dublin, top of the morning to you. Give me the Pittsburgh Steelers +3 against the Minnesota Vikings. I got some numbers and matchup stuff I like here, but the real reason's simple. Coming into the year, I liked Pittsburgh just as much as, or probably more than Minnesota. Both teams are 2-1. I haven't changed that stance, especially with Carson Wentz starting in Dublin here. There is much more disaster potential with Minnesota than Pittsburgh. And also, this is based on nothing, but I would assume this is a virtual Steelers home game. I think you look at the way that Steelers fans travel to road games, and Dan Rooney had the relationship in Ireland, and I think the Steelers are an NFL Tiffany franchise, who they kind of put on a pedestal, and I'm sure that that influences the overseas teams. I remember when the Patriots started to go overseas, they were huge after they had won a bunch. The Steelers have won a bunch, maybe not the last 10, 15 years, but I think that this is probably going to be a virtual Steelers home game. But moving on to the matchup portion, even with a flat opening week against the Jets, the Steelers still grade out as the fourth best pass rushing unit in football, according to PFF, and will continue to force the issue as the team that's blitzed as the second highest rate in the NFL. And you flip that, Minnesota has allowed pressures at the second highest clip in the NFL. They have had serious offensive line problems, and I expect that to rear its ugly head here against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh also has a bye coming up. You'll hear this stat a couple times, but teams with a bye coming up in their next game win 57% of their games and cover 58% of their games over the last decade. First half under 20.5 in this game as well is a bet that I'll be taking. It's a low number, but I'm taking it. This feels like every bit of an ugly 7-7 halftime London start, 17-14 finish. So give me the first half under. Funny enough, I have two bets on the 9:30 Dublin game. That is more bets than I have on the entirety of the 1 o'clock slate. At 1 o'clock, give me Jalen Hurts touchdown for 5 units, -115 over on ESPN bet. I haven't checked if this line has moved. It is -135 or -140 on most books. But let's just run down a little bit of how successful Jalen Hurts' touchdown has been. He has scored in all 3 games this year, plus 17.5 units so far for me. He scored in 13 of 19 games last year, where I was plus 45 units. He scored in 11 of 17 games in 2023. He scored in 12 of 18 games in 2022. So since the tush push has been invented, it has hit in 39 of his last 57 games at a 68.4% clip. Jalen Hurts' touchdown is not only the best bet in sports, it's basically a 401k. It's an incredible investment. 405. Give me the Los Angeles Rams -3.5 against the Indianapolis Colts. This feels like a clock struck midnight on Cinderella game for the Indianapolis Colts. Yes, the Colts have blown out the Dolphins and Titans, but they needed an incredibly questionable and controversial call to beat, in my opinion, a meh and mid Denver team. Yes, I think this is a terrible, terrible spot for the Colts, with the Rams coming off last week's comeback loss. I think they're ready to prove they were the team from the first half, not the second half. I think the Rams are a legit contender and a top five-ish team in the NFL. Maybe we'll do NFL power rankings next week. I would say off the top of my head, Eagles, Bills, Packers, Rams, Lions, Ravens. So that would put the Rams in at 4. I think the Rams are that good. I think the Rams are a true blue Super Bowl contender. And I think that the Colts are a fun story, and they may win 10 or 11 games. I think they'll have their pants pulled down in games against really good quarterback play and against legitimate contenders, while handling the also rans of the AFC South and beyond. The Rams' pass rush has been top notch so far this year. Jared Verse was awesome last year as a rookie, but full on breakout this year. They're tied for the league lead in sacks in the NFL with 12. Sean McVay and Matt Stafford very much play to their role as a duo with the Rams. They're 32-9 straight up when listed as favorites. Only 9-17 straight up as an underdog. Luckily, favored here in this one against the Indianapolis Colts. Another 405 game that I'm betting on here. I've got the Jacksonville Jaguars +3.5 at the San Francisco 49ers. This is just, I'm a little bit higher on the Jags than consensus. I think that the Jags are 2-1, and people are acting like they're 0-3 or 1-2. I know it hasn't always been pretty. I think they've taken care of business, and this is a team that is closer to being 3-0 than they are to 1-2, in my opinion. But hand up, I would not be betting this game if Nick Bosa was playing. Yet again, the 49ers have gotten bit by the mysterious injury bug and are down a ton of guys already, with guys playing who are banged up. I know Purdy is coming back, but Mac Jones was doing fine. And I think losing Bosa is a much bigger loss than Purdy is a gain. The 49ers are 57-28 straight up in games Bosa has played, and 6-12 straight up in games that he has not since 2019. And then I've talked about this each week, but after a season of no takeaways, Jacksonville has changed their ways. They have 9 turnovers on defense this year, the most in the NFL. And this comes after last year where they played 10 total games where they didn't force a single turnover, which was by far the most in the NFL. They have really turned around the turnover luck on the defensive side of the ball. At 425, I've got the Baltimore Ravens -2.5 at the Kansas City Chiefs for 1 unit. Patrick Mahomes has never won a game straight up as a home underdog. He is 0-2 straight up in the NFL. He was 0-7 straight up in college at Texas Tech. Lamar Jackson, 21-4 straight up off of a Ravens loss in his career as a favorite of less than 6 points or an underdog off of a loss. Lamar is 10-1 straight up, only losing on the road to the Browns back in 2021. The Ravens, this is a fun fact. The Ravens own the longest active streak as a betting favorite in the NFL, with this week as the streak being up to 21 games. Their last game as an underdog came back in week 1 of last season against the Kansas City Chiefs. At 425, I also have the Chicago Bears money line at the Las Vegas Raiders for 1 unit. The Cowboys were the first team that didn't sack Caleb Williams in a game that he played since Stanford on September 9th, 2023. I hope Caleb, watched the tape of that game and said, you know what, it's fun not getting sacked. And the Raiders are not a team that's going to sack you a ton. Teams with a bye coming up in their next game are winning 57% of the games, 58% over the last decade. The Bears have a bye coming up. I think the Bears should be favored here. The Raiders were a team I was high on coming into the year, but they have been incredibly, incredibly disappointing. So give me the Bears to take care of business on the money line. I don't know what the point spread is at. At this point, it's flipped 1.5 both ways, but give me the Chicago Bears. On Sunday Night Football, give me the Green Bay Packers -6.5 at the Dallas Cowboys. Matt LaFleur is 20-12 straight up and 19-13 against the spread after a straight up loss as the coach of the Green Bay Packers. Teams with a bye, have you heard this stat? I've only said it twice. They're coming up in their next game. They're winning 57% of their games, 58% over the last decade. Green Bay has a bye coming up next week. I do have 2 teasers on the board today. So 2 teasers for tomorrow. Teaser 1, these are 2 10-point teasers at -125. Lions, pick 'em. Rams +6.5. Packers +6.5 for 1 unit. And then Lions, pick 'em. Chargers +3.5 against the Giants. And Packers +3.5. So I like the Lions and Lions and Chargers at 1 o'clock. If you're inclined to bet a couple more games, I would lay the 9.5 with Detroit, and I would even consider laying the I guess, is it 5.5 or 6.5 here with the Chargers? 6.5 now with the LA Chargers. You can find a -6 out there. I would lay that before I would take the points with New York, but I decided a better way. Throw them in some parlays, throw them in some teasers, and that's what I'm doing there with that Chargers money line and with that Lions money line, basically in those teasers. Like, it's not Chargers money line; it's Chargers +3.5. But you get the picture. Let's talk about the games that I did not have a play on. Carolina at New England. New England's a 5.5 point favorite. The total's 43. I wouldn't bet that game with your money. Don't bet it with your own. At 1 o'clock, Washington and Atlanta. Atlanta, a 2.5 point favorite. Marcus Mariota is out there. Terry McLaurin's out. But after watching Washington absolutely beat the crap out of the Las Vegas Raiders last year, and last week, I should say, and watching the Atlanta Falcons lose 30-0 to the moribund Carolina Panthers, I don't know how you could bet this on either side. At 1 o'clock, we've got the Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans. Yet another terrible, terrible matchup here. Some of these 1 o'clock matchups are horrible. Carolina, New England, Tennessee, Houston, New Orleans, Buffalo is a different type of terrible. That's just an unfair type of terrible. Then you have Washington, Atlanta with a guy who got benched last week in Penix and Marcus Mariota playing quarterback. It's a astoundingly bad 1 o'clock slate, one of the worst I've ever seen. And then we fast forward all the way to Monday Night Football, where we have the New York Jets taking on the Miami Dolphins. I would lean the Jets plus 2.5, and I would also lean the over at 45 there. Those might end up on my card, depending on how Sunday goes by the time Monday rolls around. At 8:15, the Cincinnati Bengals play the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are 7.5-point favorites. The total is 44. I'm not betting this one. What I will tell you is I think Denver is especially designed to beat up on bad quarterback play. That defense I don't think is quite nearly as good as people think it is against good quarterback play, but when they play bad quarterbacks, they make them look helpless. Now, the flip side to that is I don't think Jake Browning and Cincinnati are nearly as bad as they showed in week 3, but I do think they're probably bad. So I'm staying away from that one. And then let's wrap up this show going through our DFS plays for this week. The DFS, let's pull it up. There we go. We got it right here. I'm going with Caleb Williams again. He's going against the Las Vegas Raiders of the 23rd ranked defense against quarterbacks. They allow the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks so far on the year. By the way, I thought about the flip side in that matchup, maybe going a little cheaper at quarterback and going with Geno Smith. But this week, going with Caleb Williams. At running back 1, I've got James Cook. James Cook is one of my big spends this week. I'm spending $7,100 on him over on DraftKings Fantasy. Going against the New Orleans Saints, I think Buffalo gets up big, and they hand the ball off to James Cook a whole heck of a lot. He's averaging 24.8 fantasy points per game, and they allow the 6th most fantasy points in the league to running backs. Cam Scatterboo, this is my bargain of the week at 5,500. Any lineup you do, I think has to include Cam Scatterboo as the full-time starter for the New York Giants, and he's got Jackson Dart who can move around a little bit with him now. I think that running game is going to take a leap with Scatterboo starting and with Dart playing quarterback. For wide receiver, I've got Puka Nacua at 7,900. He's averaging 26.5 fantasy points per game. This was my pick for Offensive Player of the Year. It's still my pick for Offensive Player of the Year, and I'm going to ride with him till the wheels fall off in terms of DraftKings Fantasy. At 5,700, I'm taking Drake London. I think we might just be getting a discount because of how bad that Atlanta week was last week. Give me Jacoby Myers with how bad the Chicago Bears defense is at 5,400. Give me Devontae Smith at flex at 5,400. I think that Tampa's going to focus on A.J. Brown, which opens things up for Devontae. And my tight end, Dallas Goedert, who is at 3,900, averaging 11 fantasy points per game. And then my defense, I'm going with the LA Chargers. Rookie quarterback making his first start. There's some upside there for the Chargers to have a really, really good fantasy performance. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up the Saturday morning spread. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the college football picks, the NFL picks. In case anybody's joining late, the college football picks, we've got over 60.5 USC Illinois, UCF +7 at K-State, Northwestern -6 against UCLA, Texas A&M -6 against Auburn, Georgia -2.5 against Alabama, Oregon +3.5 against Penn State, and South Carolina -5.5 against Kentucky. And that's going to do it. Thanks for joining us on the Saturday Morning Spread. Saturday Morning Spread Country,